In this video, I'm walking through on-page optimization and HTML tag structuring. Let me show you what I mean. So first, if we look at Evonik here, the biggest thing that I'm looking at initially is how is the page optimized and is it best optimized for the keyword or phrase that would actually make the most sense for them to focus on? And if you look here, they're ranking actually pretty well for the term industrial adhesives. And that term, based on the primary keyword or phrase that many of these other competing websites are ranking for, is one of the highest search volume. And the reason why we're looking at this is to determine if this page is best optimized for the term that would make most sense. And in this case, the term looks to be industrial adhesives. So if we look here at their page again, specifically, and we look at what's going on from an optimization perspective, you can see the content here at the top is industries, adhesives, and sealants. So they are not optimized for industrial adhesives, for example. Now, the other thing to look at then would be the page title. And you can see many of these other competing websites here have industrial adhesives in the actual title of the page. And if we look here at Evonik at number 17, you can see here again, the page title is adhesives and sealants. So they're missing that from an optimization perspective as well. And you can see here, the primary key phrase their page is ranking for, or the biggest key phrase, is adhesive additives. And that's 150 searches per month instead of 500 for industrial adhesives. Now, the other thing to look at then would be the H tag structuring on their actual page. And what I've done is taken all of their H tags on their website, pulled from HTML, and added them to this document here. So you can see H2, visit our customer portal, digital customer portal, and then industries, and then adhesives and sealants is their H1. Now, there are a number of different things going on here. You can see all of these are H2s, and all of these are H2s, and they have an H1 right here for adhesives and sealants. So the first thing I'm seeing here is they're out of order. We have H2s first, and then an H1, and then H2s. Generally speaking, you'd want to have H1 first, and then have any of your H2s. Now, it's not critical necessarily to have them in order, and I'll share with you a couple details about that in a second. But the biggest thing is H1 generally should be the first tag, and H2s and H3s would be nested underneath the H1. The other thing here is the H1 should have the primary keyword or phrase that you want to rank for, or at least have it in an H2 somewhere. And again, if we look at back at Ahrefs here, you can see here industrial adhesives. If we do a control F here for industrial adhesives, that's not nowhere to be found in any of their H1s or H2s. And one last check here would be industrial adhesives. So they have that in their content one time, which is good, but still likely going to be more difficult for them to rank if they don't have that somewhere in title, H1, H2, or within the content more than one time, usually for a keyword or phrase that has some level of competition. Now, I wanted to share with you a couple other data points here regarding H tags and best practices for them. Generally speaking, you'd have one H1 for the page's main topic. You'd have H2s for major sections and then H3s for subsections within them. So as an example, if you were talking about water-based adhesives and wanted to talk a little bit about some of the water-based adhesive options, you could have an H3 like that nested underneath the H2. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be tabbed in like this. I just do that for visual structure. So you'd have, these are all H2s here. Let me just confirm, show you one thing here. This is an H2. As you can see, when I click on it and hover over here, you can see H2 on the left side of the screen there at the top, right underneath the image, H2 dot. And you can see all of these then are H2s. So the other factor then would be if you have additional content, again, add it in an H3 that could be styled similar to this, but I'd recommend changing it slightly. Generally, the order should flow logically like an outline. H1, H2, H3, H2, H3, and so on. You'd have H3s nested under H2s, and then H2s again be the primary subsections within the primary section, which would be the H1. And the reason for this is this helps accessibility, content structure, and semantic SEO, allowing Google and users to understand how content fits together. And content structure, pretty straightforward. Accessibility, again, also straightforward. Semantic SEO helps also with ranking, not only organically, but in AI. And I'll get to that here in a second as well, with how this helps with different crawlers and algorithms. Now, the other thing here, it is okay to be non-sequential. You can do this. In most cases, you do this with less important H tags, not the H1 and H2s, for example, but this can be done. And in general, Google will primarily look at content hierarchy and top vote grouping, not necessarily the strict tag order. But I always recommend to make it as easy as possible for search algorithms and AI to understand your content and associate what keywords and phrases are actually in it to make it as easy as possible for you to rank for what you want to rank for. Now, in general, what I would recommend to avoid is using headings purely for styling or font size. For example, using an H1 just because it looks big, or using an H2 because it has a nice style or font setting, which it looks kind of like this was done here, industries and then adhesives and sealants. So in this case, industries should either be regular text and not be an H tag, and you can still style it this way, or have it as potentially part of the H1 so that you don't go out of order here necessarily. But there are other, as you saw here in this list, there are other ones that are still out. I believe the H1 was actually right here. So these other ones are would still put you out of order and should be cleaned up there as well. Looks like these here, this visit our customer portal and digital customer portal right here. So these are being rendered before this content, even though it's on the right side of the page. Now, a couple more things to look at here. Multiple H1s with different topics. Generally speaking, you should only have one H1 per page. And search engines have said they can still read and understand that content. But in general, I want to make it as clear as possible for search which keyword, what keyword or phrase is the primary focus for this page. So I almost always recommend just having a single H1 per page. And then lastly here, jumping erratically. So H1 to H4 to H2 without a logical structure can make the page harder to crawl and parse in some cases. So I would recommend against doing that as well. And lastly here, sequential structure equals cleaner semantics and better UX or user experience. And a non-sequential structure is still fine if it still reflects a logical hierarchy and context. I am going to typically recommend to keep a sequential structure that makes sense and makes it as easy as possible for your site to be found for the keywords and phrases that make sense. Hopefully you got some value from this video. If you did, subscribe to my channel. I'd greatly appreciate that. And that's it. I'll see you on the next one.